Good Erev Shabbos, Parshas Kedoshim. This Shabbos we're celebrating our Salute to Israel Shabbos here at Kingsway. The Parsha opens, Vayidaber Hashem, God speaks to Moshe, and he says, Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, that you should speak to the entire nation of Israel and teach them and tell them and charge them, Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy. And then the Parsha continues with many mitzvahs. One of the fundamental questions that many Mefarshim wonder about is why the Torah, why Hashem tells Moshe to speak Kol Adas B'nei Israel, speak to the entire congregation of Israel. And who else is he going to be speaking to? Only a portion of the people, only to two people. Of course, the message has to get out to everybody. And yet, most often, when the Torah says, when Hashem speaks to Moshe to speak to the people, it says, Daber el B'nei Israel. What is it? Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael. Speak to the entire congregation of Israel. So Rashi famously teaches that this parsha is a unique parsha because Rov Gufei Torah are contained in it. What is Rov Gufei Torah? Rov Gufei Torah means the majority of the essential messages of the fundamentals of the critical foundations of the Torah, they are found within this parsha. Rov Gufei Torah, the majority of the essential principles are in this parsha. So what does that mean? And here there are quite a few explanations as well. I'd like to share with you three. Number one, the Torah Tamima teaches that in this parsha we have many mitzvos that are shayach for liyidias kol hamon am, that most people should know. You don't have to consult a great scholar. You don't have to be a big posek. You don't have to know the fine nuances of halachic reasoning and application in order to be aware of these types of many of these mitzvos. This is Judaism 101. And most people should know about these mitzvahs. Basic stuff. And whether it's not lying, or lashon hara, or haftal l'reacha kamocha. I mean, there's just some basic stuff that you don't have to be a great scholar to know, and that is Rov Gufei Torah. So says the Torah Tamima, and I believe that in the Torah Tamima's first approach, we see an important message here. Look through the parsha, and you might think that many of these mitzvos do require a certain level of halachic knowledge and wisdom and scholarship. And therein, I think, if we look at the mitzvos and feel that way, we should be challenged and say, that, no, this is what a Jew has to know. This is Judaism 101. This is the basic stuff. And if we look through these mitzvos and we feel that we do not have mastery over these mitzvos and they seem to be beyond us, then we should challenge ourselves. Because although Judaism is not religion for dummies, as it were, it is not it's not basic Judaism. It's basic religion. The basics of Judaism are something that are entirely attainable by every Jew. And if we feel that we have not yet mastered many of these mitzvahs, then we should challenge ourselves to what we can to reinvest our time and our effort and our commitment to get to that basic level of knowledge, understanding, and thus a more profound commitment. Number two, the Torah Tamima says that contained within this parsha is an important mitzvah, and that is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. We know, love thy neighbor as thyself, and we know that the Talmud says this is kol haTorah kula, to treat other people decently, properly, be mentioned. That is, in the words of the Talmud, kol haTorah. So when Rashi says Rov Gufei Torah, the majority of the principles of the basics of Judaism are in this of the principles of Judaism are in this parsha, it means go to the pasuk of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That's it. That's the one. It has everything in it. Kol haTorah kula. Vilna Gaon famously taught that every parsha in the Torah from Bereshis until V'zos HaBracha contains messages of chesed. chesed, kindness, compassion, doing good on behalf of others. The ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That is Rov Gufei Torah. And indeed, this too is an important message. The message is self-evident. That with everything we do, whether it's eating matzahs on Pesach, or somewhat tongue-in-cheek, eating blintzes on Shavuos, or all the other mitzvahs that we do, whether it's davening, or putting on tefillin, or observing the laws of Shatnes, or Shabbos, all of these mitzvahs, in one way or another, should, in our mind's eye, in our own consciousness, be structured in a way that refines us to be more compassionate, kind, good people, intent on doing chesed for others. That is Kol HaTorah Kula, or as Rashi said, in this parsha, Rov Gufei Torah. Finally, if you look through the parsha, you'll find a phrase that seems to be a refrain coming up over and over and over again. And that is the pasuk, the phrase of Ani Hashem. Do this mitzvah, ki Ani Hashem. I am God. Do this mitzvah, Ani Hashem. Do that mitzvah, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem. It comes up multiple times throughout the Sedra. What does it mean? Do this mitzvah, that mitzvah, the other mitzvah, ki Ani Hashem, for I am God. I think we know who you are. Hashem, the giver of the Torah, the book, the author of the book that we are reading. It's not a surprise. So what is this emphasis? Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem. It seems to me that the Torah is telling us a twin pillar message here. 2 points that are connected at the hip. Number one is that some, or maybe many mitzvahs we can do them sort of improperly, and nobody would know the difference. We can violate a mitzvah, violate a command of the Torah, and nobody would know the difference. The only one who knows is me and Hashem. Plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't realize that I did that. Or I didn't realize I had to do that. And you, the onlooker, my neighbor, my friend, my family member, would never know the difference. Right? I gave you bad advice, one of the prohibitions in the Torah. I gave you bad advice, and I'm enjoined against giving bad advice. How would you know if I intentionally gave you bad advice or not? You wouldn't. Only I know and Hashem knows. There are many mitzvahs in which the only arbiter of how I accomplished the mitzvah or how I violated the mitzvah is Hashem. And therefore, it calls upon us to live a life of dignity, of integrity, of honesty in our relationship to the mitzvahs of the Torah, and thus in our relationship to our neighbors. Because at the end of the day, nobody knows anybody. And the only one who truly knows is the person themselves, is me, about myself. And so Hashem says, do this mitzvah, that mitzvah, the other mitzvah, ki ani Hashem, I am God. And it's really only the two of us. So live honestly, live with integrity, do it right, not because anybody else will know, but just because, just the two of us, you and me. That's it. And that should be enough. And I think that the second layer or pillar of this message, and it's integrally connected to what I just said, is that Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem is the refrain over and over again in this parsha with so many mitzvahs, is to remind us of the fact that our engagement with Torah and mitzvahs and our encounter with a life of mitzvah is to create a life in which we have divine consciousness, hakaras Hashem, an awareness of Hashem in our lives. And if we live a life of divine consciousness, we will most surely live lives that are proper lives, that are dignified lives, that are refined, that are profound, that are meaningful, that are purposeful, that are kind and compassionate. Because I always have God on the mind. I have an awareness of divine consciousness. Ani Hashem is not just reminding us who it is who's giving us the Torah. It's reminding us that we should always remind ourselves of who it is who has given us the Torah. Sometimes people can live a life of great meticulous performance of mitzvahs, but really be disconnected from the divine element of it, from a spiritual element of Torah. And therefore, Ani Hashem reminds us to live a life where we have divine consciousness. And if we do so, I think it seems to me that is certainly Rov Gufei Torah. That is the majority of the principles of the Torah in this parsha, means to have a life of divine awareness. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the breadth of mind, the peace of mind, that we're able to live a life of divine consciousness, where we raise ourselves and raise others around us. Good Shabbos.